Concluding our learning about the War of 1812 with this video. It'll talk about the end of the war and the effects of the war on the United States. Here are the video goals. Write these questions down and answer them as you listen. Alright, so we left off last time with America on the ropes. In 1814, things looked really bad for the United States. Britain had launched a three-pronged attack that threatened to cut the United States into pieces. The first was an invasion into New York, south from Canada, that was designed to cut off New England from the rest of the country and maybe allow the British to capture all of New England and claim it as part of Canada. Second was an invasion up into Washington, D.C., and then after that further north. And so this was going to capture the national capital and then cut up into the rich part of the country made up of Maryland and Pennsylvania. And then last of all, there was a third attack planned to capture the city of New Orleans and then to go up the Mississippi River and conquer the American heartland. But this attack doesn't really work out, and America actually makes a comeback. And it manages to stop the British attacks on all three fronts. So America is first able to block the British invasion coming down from Canada, so they save New York. Second, they're able to keep the British from advancing any further into America past Washington, D.C. So even though the British capture D.C. and burn down the White House, they are able to stop the British from going any further. And this happens at Fort McHenry, which is where the national anthem is written, because there's a fort that is able to hold off British ships at nighttime. There are rockets in the air. It's glorious. And then third, Andrew Jackson is able to crush a British army at New Orleans and prevent the British from going up the Mississippi. So these three victories caused the British to more or less give up and call for an end to the war. We should talk about Andrew Jackson. So over the course of the war, his accomplishments caused him to emerge as a national hero. Basically, Andrew Jackson becomes for the War of 1812 what George Washington was for the Revolutionary War. He becomes a symbol for American pride and American power. So at the start of the war, he was sent to fight against a major Native American tribe, and he wins a battle against these guys and forces them to give up their land, and he forces them westward and claims this territory for the United States. Then Jackson is sent south to defend New Orleans, and in the Battle of New Orleans, Jackson's army of only 4,000 people is able to totally crush a British army of 11,000 people. And so this huge victory makes Jackson a hero, and it also makes America really proud of the American ability to stand up to the British. It also totally demoralizes the British and makes them want peace even more. So all of this leads to the Treaty of Ghent. Ghent being a small town in Belgium where the treaty was written and signed. So basically, after the three American victories where they stopped the British invasion, Britain decides they've had enough. They realize that in order to beat America, it's going to be a long and expensive war, and they don't want to fight it. So they ask for the U.S. for peace, and the United States accepts. Basically, they want to end the war too because they're afraid this might, they got kind of lucky and they really could have lost big. So they signed the peace treaty known as the Treaty of Ghent. And the treaty says basically that everything is going to go back the way it was before the war. So the U.S. doesn't gain any territory, but it doesn't lose any territory to Great Britain either. And so basically the war just ends in a tie, making the Treaty of Ghent a pretty boring treaty. There are four big effects of the war. So even though the war ended in a tie, it still had a really big influence on how America developed afterwards. First, Britain has a new respect for the United States and stops messing with them. So the British now know that the US will stand up and fight for their rights, so they no longer just kind of push the US around like they were before. Second, nationalism in the United States grows. And so nationalism is a feeling of national pride and unity. And this already existed in the United States a little bit, but after the War of 1812, Americans begin to feel really proud of America, and they all feel united because they all fought in this war against the same enemy. And during the war, the national anthem is written, and it's actually written about a victory over the British at Fort McHenry. And you can see a probably unrealistic picture of that battle there. Third, Native Americans out near the Mississippi River are defeated and forced to give up a lot of their land. The Native American leader Tecumseh is killed, and his people are forced to move westward. And finally, a new generation of leaders emerge. And these include, most importantly, Andrew Jackson, who was a general down in New Orleans, but also other leaders who we'll learn about later who basically take over control of America after the old Founding Fathers generation becomes too old to govern the country anymore. So those are the main effects of the war on the United States. Here are the questions again. Hopefully now you can answer them in a sentence or two. Hooray!